to record right now, Kim, and then let you go ahead.
Thank you. Welcome. Thanks, Liz. Welcome to RBCM at Home. My name is Kim Goff, and I'm the learning program developer at the Royal BC Museum. Today, I'm coming to you from the museum, which is located on the territories of the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations, the Lekwungen-speaking people in Victoria, British Columbia. RBCM at Home started in March when our museum and archive were closed due to the pandemic. It was an opportunity to talk to staff about what they were working on from home. Now that some of us are back at the museum, this is an opportunity to continue to reach out to those of you at home or at school around BC. Today, I have two guests here to talk about entomology, the study of insects. Dr. Joel Gibson has been the curator of entomology at the Royal BC Museum since 2016. Before pursuing his doctorate, he was a high school teacher, and following his return to research, he was at the Canadian National Collection of Insects, Arachnids, and Nematodes in Ottawa, and had positions in scientific project management and DNA-based wetland biodiversity assessment. Nina Pak is a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley in California at the Tsutsi Lab of Evolution, Ecology, and Behavior of Social Insects. The research at the lab focuses on ants and bees, how they communicate, and why they behave the way they do. And like Joel, she also has an interest in beach flies. To get us started, my question for both of you is, why do we need to study insects?
You want to take that one, Nina? Well, it's a big one. I mean, we need to because, I mean, there's the simple numbers question. Like, there's just so many insects. They're all around us. And they're also in every kind of area you want to look. Like, ecologically, they're in forests, they're in soil. And then how they interact with people in every way. They affect our food, they pollinate, some of them spread disease. So you can't not interact with insects as soon as you step out your door.
Nina, would you add to that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I think about why insects are so important. They're in like every aspect of our lives, from like medicine to, agriculture and for just studying like how life evolves and just being. So,
Nina, can you tell us more about where you are right now and what you're studying?
Yeah, so I'm at UC Berkeley. I study beach flies. I'm interested in salt tolerance. How are flies adapting to saline environments? How are they behaving under sort of these salty conditions? And how are organisms shifting from one environment to another? So are they shifting from saline environments to freshwater environments? Or are they shifting from saline environments to a more terrestrial environment? Yeah.
And how did you find Joel? How did the two of you connect?
That's a really interesting question. My advisor was reading the Halakai magazine, I believe.
Hakai magazine.
I'm mispronouncing the name. And there was this article about barnacle flies. And that was exactly what I've been interested in, is sort of marine flies in general, like what kind of insects live on the beach. And just to see a magazine article with a scientist like Joel, I was like, I have to talk to him and hear what what does he observe at these beaches or in these marine environments. So I actually just cold emailed him and was like, hey, can we chat about these things? And that one email sort of just bloomed into like a whole discussion about marine flies. So
yeah, I think for some folks, when they think of museums, they might just think of exhibits, pretty cases to look at and nice displays. And I don't know if a lot of people realize just how much research is happening in a place like this. Joel, do you get a lot of these types of cold call emails from researchers asking information? What's kind of a typical day for a museum curator like?
I'd say it's probably at least every other day. There's a question, and sometimes it's friends. It's, friends, I think of like other scientists that work in a field that might say, oh, by the way, I saw one of these. Do you know if these are known in BC? Little questions like that. And sometimes it's, members of the public that'll see something interesting that sometimes leads to a simple little answer like, oh, yep, that's a pretty common bumblebee, you know, great picture, thanks for showing me. But sometimes it turns into something really unusual that the public will see. And sometimes it's things like Nina contacting us that are like, okay, this is a really good question that's leading to something else that's going to change, you know, what we're going to do in the collection and how we're going to do it. And maybe it'll turn into, you know, publications or exhibits down the road, but it's real research that comes from us working with other researchers and kind of steering it to be what other people are working on.
Do you have a formal relationship with a particular university or students, or does it just sort of base on
It is possible, and I know some curators do. They'll have like faculty appointments with University of Victoria, and some have elsewhere, which is always helpful because then you can actually have students that are your students, and you can help to fund them so that they can, you know, be able to pay for their studies to do things. Right now, I mostly have informal connections with students that are doing projects somewhere else that, well, and sometimes the other big part is borrowing specimens. There's a big loan of specimens. I know, what was it, about a year and a half ago, I sent a bunch of the specimens. I didn't know what they were. I kind of guessed. I wasn't sure about the species. I knew Nina was working on them. So I loaned them to her at her institution. And then she can identify them. And then, you know, when she's done, she'll send them back to me. And then they're in the collection all identified well, maybe with new species names, maybe not. So that's a big part of it too. Like specimens go in and out of the collection all of the time. It's not a closed door.
So loans might be borrowed. Have you borrowed anything, Nina? Are you hoping to?
Yes. So when I first started studying beach flies, I didn't really know how big the distribution of these flies were. And so when I started talking to Joel and he was like, oh, we have some in the collection, I was able to add that geographic data and that, you know, like what genus and species were collected at the area to my own database. So it was really cool to like find out, oh, wow, these flies that I find commonly in Hawaii and like the coast of California also go way up north to Vancouver area. Yeah.
And I sent you some specimens from Haida Gwaii, and we asked a colleague of ours in Alaska, and we're like, yeah, they might be there too.
Yeah, so the range, you know, I thought it was pretty much neotropical, but it's pretty, you know, expanding the more I've like learned about these flies.
And is that really because they've been understudied, or are things changing? Is the climate changing, or are they adapting, or is it a combination of all of those things?
I think it's a combination of those things, and it's hard for sure because we still don't know a lot about them in terms of, you know, we have just observations and like biological notes, but there hasn't been a lot of coupling of those taxonomic journals with DNA analysis to see like how are those things shifting, how are they related to each other, you know, how far is those distributions. We haven't had like a big picture visualization of those, you know, those questions or like how those how the species are doing right during this. Yeah, so there's a lot of work to be done to sort of to see the big picture of how these flies fit in.
And some of it is just data that hasn't been sort of brought into the picture yet. Like you kind of suggested that, Nina, that sometimes people will go somewhere and work on, say, the bees, and they happen to collect a lot of data about flies, but they just kind of sit on it. It's back in their lab, and until people like Nina and I ask them for it, then you start to fill in the picture from California all the way up to Alaska. In an example, I was looking at a different group of beach flies, different from the ones Nina works on, and I kept seeing references to these specimens collected in 1900 in Port Renfrew, which is just up island. And I couldn't figure out, like, where are they? They're not in our collection. They weren't in Vancouver. I had no idea where these specimens were. And eventually, through the course of these old papers published in 1910, I found out they're in Ohio. I wrote to the Ohio State University Insect Collection, and the collection manager there said, yep, here they are. 6 specimens from Port Renfrew, and she sent me a picture and I identified them for her, and they just happened to get taken back to Ohio 120 years ago. So if you don't ask, then those specimens wouldn't have been recorded.
Sounds like you have to be a bit of a detective as well as a scientist. and willing to do some creative thinking and going through historical documents too, which is why also a museum collection is so great. It's the best thing we have, I guess, to a time machine. Lets us find documents and specimens from 1910. Nina, can you tell us a little bit more about your research project in sort of general terms?
Yeah, so I'm studying how organisms shift from one environment to another, and I'm using beach models as sort of a model system to understand the shift between the saline environment to a freshwater environment. So even though I study beach flies, they're common on beaches like in Hawaii, they've managed to be found in high elevated freshwater streams in Hawaii too. And so I'm interested in sort of how did this shift occur? Did it happen once? Did it happen multiple times? Does it happen very frequently? So looking at the evolutionary history might sort of resolve those kinds of questions. And then looking at sort of the distribution of these beach flies and what makes a beach fly live at this beach? Those are kind of questions that I think about a lot, especially when I collect beach flies and I see a lot of beaches, and every beach is different. It's not just this source of paradise and, going there to like build sandcastles. There's actually a lot out there, which, is actually really like fun and crazy about sort of doing beach collecting is the wide range of organisms that you might be collecting that you don't really notice when you're walking down that beach or, enjoying the sun or like, walking the ocean. So
if you thought of how much was alive, not only what you could see flying in front of you, but in the water and in the sand beneath your toes, it would be kind of overwhelming. It would be hard to process all that was going on. So what makes a beach fly a beach fly? How is it different from maybe a fly I'd find at my house? Joel, I'm going to ask you that one.
Well, it's funny because like when you say that, like right away, my head kind of jumps to about 5 or 6 different families, which are really different from each other. And if you were to put them under the microscope and I were to hold them right up here to the camera and show you, you would see, okay, these ones are big and black and fuzzy. These ones are small and gray and shiny. And there's a lot of different ones that fit, but a lot of them, and like what Nina's talking about, a lot of them are only found on beaches. So they all get kind of called beach flies. This is the problem. Some of these things are so specialized and so poorly known, they don't have a common name. So it's not like, it's this specific type of bumblebee versus that specific type of bumblebee. They're all called beach flies. But when Nina and I sit here, we could say, well, we could probably give you about 25 species right off the top of our head that qualify as beach flies. The key is that for the most part, these are species you don't find in the forest. You don't generally find them in your house. And when, like Nina said, you do find them in weird places they're not supposed to be. Like this is a beach fly that looks like the one on the ocean, except it's in a Hawaiian freshwater stream. That's weird. And I've looked at other families too that kind of have that too, where the entire family is not beach flies. None of them are beach flies, except for one species. And you're like, well, okay, that's weird. Why would one of them only ever be on beaches?
Mm-hmm. Nina, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, it's such a, like, there's so many species out there that we don't know about or we don't fully understand that it's really hard to like even characterize, as Joel said, like what is a beach fly. So we're not, there's so much more to like figure out to characterize that. And then even the details that I look at to describe beach flies are very, like looking closely at under a microscope level, that you can't just look at it, with your bare eyes and then say like, oh, this is a canacid or this is the beach fly that Nina's thinking about. So
there must be behaviors as well that make them unique from other flies. Can we talk a little bit about that? What sort of mating or eating or life, birth, death things are happening with beach flies that are unique?
There's one that it's funny that because on the beach sometimes, and I mean, Nina, you might see the same thing. Some of them just sort of catch your eye, and you get used to. Oh wait, that's these ones, that's those ones. Sometimes it's a material. Some are on kelp. Some are only ever on sand. Some are on like dead carcasses of dead fish washed up. There's one I started noticing the last few years, and I always noticed it on white pieces of driftwood, exclusively white pieces of driftwood. And it would always be kind of walking and flicking its wings and had one dot at the end of its wings. And it got to the point now where I could, and then when I would bring it back to the lab and identify it, it was always the same species. I identified what it was. I'm still trying to determine if it's always been in BC or it's actually been recently introduced from Asia. I'm not sure because there's not a lot of records of it. But now at the beach, I can see them and I know right away, as soon as something is like walking and flicking its wings like that on a piece of driftwood, I'm like, oh, I know that one. That's a Fusilia apicalis, done. And I can, collect a few and move on. So you're right. Behavior gets stuck in your head as much as the shape does.
Yeah, and also in my experience, there's like one site that I go to a lot at the Berkeley Marina, and they're really good at avoiding the waves. Like they're just like very quick flyers. They're very like fast moving. One thing that I haven't really seen that people always ask me is like, oh, are they the flies that bite you on the beach? And in my experience, I've never been bitten by them, so I don't think they are blood feeding or any of that kind. So that is just something to distinguish that they're not the blood feeding kind. Yeah.
Are they? So, what is the value of a beach fly? What is it giving us? Is it eating dead carcasses and keeping the beach clean? I can think of pollinators and all the good things they're doing. I'm not sure what are some of the things beach flies are doing.
I think most of these beach flies are decomposing like the kelp or the sea lettuce or the whatever kind of debris that they vegetable, like whatever kind of debris is on the beach. But Joel and I have been talking about that question of like, how are they able to be there in such like a salty environment? Are they there for some kind of nutrient cycling that they're, moving nutrients from the ocean to the land? Like we don't know. We don't have a good understanding of that yet. So, but I just want to say is that like, if we don't know what's on the beaches that are being affected by climate change, then how are we going to make policy decisions around these beaches? Or how are these communities going to be affected in the future when we have rising sea levels and all sorts of climate change effects? So.
And it's funny, and it kind of lays into the question. I just noticed the chat window is up too. And there's a question that ties into it about, essentially what is the edge of the beach? Lori wrote in with this. And it's funny, this is a debate I have every time I go out to the beach with Henry Chung, who's the invertebrate curator at the museum as well. And we'll kind of sit there and eat our lunch and be like, okay, where does the beach stop? And where is it the forest? And sometimes, and also where is that different if it's like a built up in a city, in an urban beach, and it's very manicured beach? We could argue, is that shoreline at all? If it's so manicured and so adjusted, yes, there's water and yes, there's land, but there's no real beach anymore. In other places, like here in BC, you'll see forest that goes right up to the edge and the tide is very minimal. You're like, well, there's no beach at all there. So there's this interesting question about, are there things that live in this narrow strip? Is it too narrow? And if ocean levels go up even as much as a meter, there could be all of these places where that habitat just doesn't exist anywhere. And it's a really interesting question. It's not an easy one, Lori. Like, it's a great question. I don't know where the beach ends.
Mm-hmm. And as you're indicating, Nina, with climate change and changing water levels, if we lose some of that habitat, what else do we lose? If those flies can't be there anymore, what else does that mean? What's the domino effect of that behavior? So these are interesting questions and big questions that you both have to tackle. And it's great, the more people thinking and talking about it. So this collaboration between the university and the museum and other people and folks that you talk to only helps to make the picture a little more clear. When you first mentioned that you found, Joel, Nina, I think you mentioned, was it barnacle flies?
Yeah.
So what is the habitat of barnacle flies? Do they live on barnacles?
I think Joel is a great expert.
Okay.
Funny you should mention that, Nina. There's actually a paper that Henry Chung and I have just had accepted and is going to be published soon. Talking.
Oh, I'll just mention Henry Chung. He's a curator here at the Royal BC Museum, curator of invertebrate zoology.
Yes, and
Go
we
ahead, sorry.
were working on this, and it was kind of an interesting early story. And it's funny that we've had people like Nina approach us about it and talk about it. And it's just an interesting little story about, barnacles that are on the beach, on the rock. And we found there were flies that only lay their eggs inside of it. And we certainly weren't the first ones to notice it. There have been other researchers, although I think the first paper to mention it was still only 1980. It wasn't that long ago. It's still in my lifetime, but I'm old. So 1980 was the first time that was mentioned. And since there's been reports of a slightly different species that also uses barnacles in Japan, but how widespread they are they specialized on certain barnacles? Is it all barnacles on all beaches? These are the types of questions we weren't sure about. And Henry and I have started to look at it and realize they're a lot more widespread in BC. There's definitely some patterns you see of barnacles that will be attacked and barnacles that won't. And then there's the question of, well, wait a minute, could you have so many flies that it could kill all the barnacles in an area? And I don't think so, but some places we saw, huge numbers of larvae inside of these barnacles kind of munching away. And then we found other things too. There were beetles that are eating the flies inside the barnacles. And you get all of these communities in a place, like Nina pointed out, in a place where there's not supposed to be insects. This is supposed to be salt water, and insects don't go there, and we're finding entire communities.
Yeah, it's just the interdependence and connections that are such a surprise. I heard once quite a while ago that if you were a type of person who's really interested in making new discoveries, then entomology is the place to be, because of the incredible diversity that exists there. So you're both well on your way to making a lot of new interesting discoveries for science. We also have the advantage that we were talking in the introduction that both Nina and Joel are a bit of a generalist as well as specialists. So if you have a question about insects in general, this is your chance. You can use that Q&A or the chat window. Nina, since I read about the lab that you work at UC Berkeley and the social behavior of insects, I have been wondering, have you seen, or has it been seen, that insects can actually learn a behavior?
Yes. I am not the best person to be talking about this, but somebody in my lab, Elizabeth Cash, has done some experiments testing if, I believe she works on harvester ants, do they learn and how do they learn? But I am not a great person to talk about how ants learn, but yeah, they do. I think there is some upcoming research though about like cognition in insects, and that has been sort of like how are bees being strategic about their foraging patterns, and how does that translate in their neurological system. Yeah, but yeah, I'm not much of an expert on that, so it's hard for me to say, but there are definitely podcasts out there and research papers and groups that talk about that.
Ooh, do you have a favorite podcast?
Yeah, I follow Big Biology.
Big Biology?
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorites. There are two professors who just interview other professors or scientists about their system, and yeah, enjoy their conversations quite a bit.
Awesome. Joel, do you have a podcast or a popular kind of program that you like for insects?
I have to admit, like the podcasts I listen to sometimes are a break from science, so a little less science oriented. But it reminds me, like just Nina, you putting it in terms of talking to scientists about things. That is how it happens, and it is often where you bring in your perspective. Like Nina has a really good background in evolutionary history and how traits come and go, and I'm telling her what I see out on a beach here, and when you come at it from two different angles but both biologists, then you can start to synthesize and work together, and that's the best thing is all of these discussions, and the best of scientists, and they're not all the best out there, but the best of biologists are the ones that can kind of sit there and listen to someone talk about their field and be like, oh wow, that's exciting, and I think I know how that contributes to what I'm doing. And it's a great world when you get in that. And that's where Nina and I will start talking about something, and it'll just be hours of going down these rabbit holes of discussing fly evolution. And it's great. I love it.
Well, today we get to be a fly on the wall for this discussion between you, get a sense of what that's like. Also, here in our chat window, there's a question. Would you talk more about the idea of exchanging nutritional material between ocean and freshwater environments? I don't know much about that. Is it all about the salts?
That's a very good question.
It's a good one, and I've looked at it before, and it's one that came up a lot. And this is one of the colleagues' ones that I asked. I know in one case it was looking at things like fish diets, like how many insects do fish eat, and does that count as nutrition going from the land into the freshwater? And if it's salmon, it'll go out to the ocean. And then you're like, okay, that's nutrition. And nutrition can be salts, but it can be proteins, sugars, just mass amounts of carbon that are going to go from the land, the fish eats it, takes it out to the ocean, and now it's part of the ocean environment. But also vice versa, when salmon come back in and get eaten by bears or get eaten by scavenging things, you're like, well, wait a minute, that's ocean carbon that is now going in the land. And they did things like tracking, and you can do this by tracking, certain tagged nitrogen and carbon, and be able to see how far from the ocean's edge does ocean carbon end up. And it's kilometers, way inland, way up mountains, that ends up because bears are eating it, and then something else, or like, smaller animals will eat it and then get eaten by a wolf or a bear. So there's this transition, and those are the bigger ones that have been studies because it's easy to work on salmon and bears. But Nina and I talk about this, and we're like, what about on a micro scale where you've got one big ball of kelp that washes up on a beach, that gets eaten by a bunch of insects, that then get eaten by a bunch of small birds, that then get eaten by a big bird. Well, that big bird lives off of the ocean, even though it has nothing to do with the ocean. And it's amazing that when you actually start to track it, we don't know how overlapping these environments are.
Yeah, to add that, it's not really tracking the salt, it's more tracking like the nutrients like nitrogen and carbon that we know like there are tags for that we can track for. For the salt, it's more like looking at the osmoregulatory processes that the beach flies are undergoing because they live in such a, saltier environment compared to most flies. Yeah, I don't know if that's answering the part about the salts, but yeah, maybe the salts are a part of it. We don't know. We haven't tested that stuff either, so.
So we're getting towards the end of our time, and I have a final question. I'm curious about the worst part and the best part of your jobs. Joel, do you want to take the best part? What's the best part of your job?
Oh, that's easy. The best part is this right now. Like, I get to talk to, people that are curious about what they're doing, that want to hear the things like, I got real excited. I saw this thing on the beach and this is what I think it means. That's the best part, that feedback back and forth and the sharing of knowledge, which is great in a place like a museum. Everyone's always sharing knowledge in different ways. So that part I really enjoy because it's not an isolated thing. So that's an easy one. The communicating the science to, friends, colleagues, the public, and that's the easy part. That's the best.
And the worst part, Joel?
The worst part is the kind of, I guess it would be the waiting, when you sort of have something and you're not sure and you've only collected one of them and you ask colleagues and they're like, Joel, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never seen that. I don't know what that is. And there's sort of the little nagging things that you're like, and then there's that feeling like if I was smarter or if I had more of these, I would know what this means. And you don't know. So sometimes you just have to be patient, and that's not always easy for me.
It can be hard. Now, Nina, you're a PhD candidate. What's the best part about that?
I like learning about beach flies. I like to learn more about how organisms are functioning in such environments like the beach. That's kind of like the cool thing is I get to be in beaches, or I used to be. With the pandemic, it's been a bit challenging. So I've really enjoyed the field aspect of my research.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I would say like the I share the frustration and sometimes the impatience that Joel was talking about of just like there's so much not known or like yeah or like waiting for results or that those kinds of things. But one thing that was actually something that surprised me about like collecting on beaches is that not all beaches are like safe to be at. As in like I've collected at a lot of rocky beaches, and being safe at the beach is a lot tougher than I expected. So like, you know, making sure I have the right shoes going into the environment. Not saying that I like hated, but it was something that unexpectedly became like, oh wow, this is also part of the job of like being at the beach is like, you gotta check the tides, you gotta like, you know, avoid rocks, you gotta go slowly into these like rocky terrains and to like these sand areas and yeah, so just the safety was kind of a surprise for me. It was like, oh wow, like people say like, oh, collecting at the beach, it must be so fun, and it is, but they don't think of like me like checking my shoes and there's no holes and like the amount of like kind of rock climbing or like parkour that I do at the beach. So when I take undergrads, I say like, you have to move slowly. Like, you know, the flies will notice you, and also like your safety is very important. So you know, make sure.
It's not all sunsets and margaritas.
Yeah.
Well, Joel and Nina, thank you both so much. For folks watching, if you missed something or you wanted to go back or share it, this has been recorded and you'll find it on the Royal BC Museum's YouTube channel. So please have a look there. The Royal BC Museum has opened and we are ready to welcome you back. You can find out more on our website about tickets and exhibits. We will be continuing our At Home Kids, and At Outside series for the foreseeable future, and links for all of those programs are posted on the website. If you have a department, area, or topic you think you'd like us to talk about, send us a note, put it in the chat window. We'd love to hear from you. Next week, I'll be talking with Dr. Catherine Bridge, an expert on Emily Carr, the artist, and she'll be talking about our upcoming exhibit, Emily Carr, Fresh Seeing, and in particular about Emily Carr's time in France. I hope you'll join us then, and until then, continue to take care of yourselves and one another. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Sam and Joel, thank you so much.